Welcome to The Shift, where we bring universal concepts back down to earth. I'm Melissa Kosi, and this week we're going to look for the compassion in one of the most competitive aspects of our lives, sports. There's a common quote in sports that says, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing." But is it really? We'll take a look at the Spanish runner who decided that winning meant losing first place, and how a similar scenario played out for an Arizona high school soccer team. We'll also take a long, hard look at Lance Armstrong and how his drive to win has led him to public shame. We'll round things out at the end by finding out who's our champion and who came in last place with the energy win, energy fail. So stick around. With me today is Desiree Perez.
Hi.
And Ryan Sims.
Good to see you.
Really good to see you guys. All right, let's kick things off. There's a story making the rounds on Facebook, and yes, it is true, about the Spanish runner Yvonne Fernandez Anaya. During a cross-country race, Anaya was trailing quite some distance behind the lead runner, Abel Mutai of Kenya. But then Mutai slowed down, thinking he'd already crossed the finish line while there was still 10 meters to go. Instead of taking advantage of his competitor's mistake, Anaya caught up to Mutai, gestured for him to cross the finish line, and then trailed behind him, taking second place. Now, I've heard of sportsmanship, but I'm not sure what I think about this. What do you guys think?
I think that this really encapsulates an aspect of sportsmanship, which is having a fellowship or a sense of fellowship with your fellow competitors, with the other people that you're participating in the sport with. And I think that this is a perfect example of doing the activity for its own sake rather than for a win. I think it's good.
Well, and I have to agree. I know that there is some back and forth on, what it means to be a competitor. But in this instance, a cross-country race, you're measuring somebody's athleticism. And the fact that he says he created a gap that I wouldn't have been able to cover if he didn't mess up. And then if you're holding it to that standard, sure, Mutai was the better athlete. And what Anaya did was just, honor that. And he wouldn't have felt, I think, from his actions and from what he's said in interviews, I don't think he would have felt like a winner if he had taken first place under those circumstances.
See, and this is where I had mixed feelings when I read this because, we have competitions so that we can drive that force to become better personally and also together collectively. Because, otherwise it's like, well, why don't you just take their best times from when they ever in any conditions. But, the whole, any given Sunday, any team, any individual can actually be on top, even if they're the underdog, even if technically their ability is lower. So I get the spirit of it. And one of the coach's sentiments was, it might have made him a better human, but it doesn't necessarily make him a better athlete because there were some chances he missed because of that. He didn't get onto the Spanish team that they were taking the race for. So I actually had a kind of mixed idea about that. Good. Well, let's also talk about there's a Arizona high school girls soccer team that also had a similar situation. In Tucson, Arizona, the coach of the Mountain View High School girls soccer team told the team to stop scoring goals after they'd already run up a 6-0 lead. The team won the game, however, they would have needed a 16-0 lead in order to advance to the semifinals. The coach says he wanted to teach his team a life lesson and save the opposing team from a demoralizing loss. So, in this case, do you think the lesson was worth the loss?
You know what? I've heard of the mercy rule. I have younger cousins in, junior league soccer, and I understand it for younger children. But in high school competition, I went to a high school where the football team kind of dominated, and we had a lot of shutout games where our score was way up. And I wonder about everything associated with high school athletics, including scholarships and funding. And so I don't know if that was the right move. It wasn't as if there was something that happened to this team where they couldn't have won if they hadn't had made a mistake, or if they had another opportunity. They just weren't playing an A game. So I'm a little more conflicted on this one.
I would say that even though it's high school and the kids are older, it's still an institution of learning, and I think that this was a good opportunity for the coach to teach his players, and not just something about the game or the sport that they were playing, but just teach a life lesson, I guess you could say, or sort of an underlying morality that is in sportsmanship, and also. It's funny because Mountain View was the rivals in Phoenix of my high school, basically, and Mountain View is really good at everything, and so I think that they could afford to maybe, sit out one championship. So.
Well, I actually tend to. It's funny because with this story, I agreed more with the life lesson, like encouraging their humanity more because they're younger and they're still forming that idea. And if they get the idea that it's just we're in it to win it and crush the other team at all costs, I think they're really missing a chance to develop themselves as a human being. Whereas the adults, they've already developed, or they have a chance to act on it, I guess, but they're there more for the athleticism. So
it's a good lesson. It's just, in the back of my head, I'm wondering.
I guess you have to find out, did they really miss out on any opportunities? I can't imagine the coach would have really, led them to a real serious...
Yeah, if somebody's college entry was on the line, probably
I doubt that was on the line, but I see what, there are other factors than just...
And I didn't know that they were good at sports all the time, all around, so that definitely...
They can afford a loss.
Yeah, that softens the blow.
And they can afford to show compassion, without demoralizing completely the other team. So.
And it's true. Well, however you look at it, a person's morals are going to decide what it means to win. And also, let's talk about what happens when you let winning define and affect your morals. Because especially in the case of Lance Armstrong, it's led him to some very difficult times right now. So
definitely,
let's talk about Lance. Lance Armstrong recently came clean on Oprah about his doping scandal. For years, he's fought back against his accusers with threatening lawsuits and strong denials. But when the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency laid out their overwhelming evidence against him, his sponsors have fled, his Tour de France titles were stripped, he was asked to step away from the Livestrong Foundation, and maybe most importantly, he's disappointed his fans. So here's a case of an athlete where winning really was the only thing. But this winning at all costs attitude, where people are turning on him now. So are we sending mixed messages?
I think that there's a bit of a paradox in professional sports. Because if a sport is to be done for its own sake, just for the enjoyment of it, and then you throw into the mix things like sponsors or money, career trajectory, you start to sort of shift your values away from what would be defined as sportsmanlike, and you might weigh more heavily, winning, making money, appealing to your sponsors, making a good story arc for your career, and
when you just said that, it's like we want to hold them to the standards of being a sportsman, a true athlete, like an Olympic athlete with that kind of character and morale. But actually, when you say that, it's more like maybe we should hold them to the standards of any other corporate business.
Yeah, and it's a
bottom line.
It's a tough position for the athlete to be in, and I'm sure that he has some regrets with how he decided to do things, but I'm sure he's learned a lot.
Now, I like that you brought up corporate business, and we're talking about all the money he's bringing in, but it might seem unrelated, but I think right now people, especially in this country, are just tired of moneyed interests putting their values and the things that they hold dear to the side. That kind of winning, I think we're ready for a new definition of winning, because that kind of standard of just becoming the most powerful and taking
no matter what, no matter who you step on to get there.
It's getting old, and I think that we're ready for a change, and so that's why something maybe like Anaya, is refreshing to us, and something like Lance Armstrong is, making us so hurt and upset.
And it's almost like we're kind of jaded from it too, because with professional sports, I mean, I hate to say it, but I kind of expect it.
Baseball.
Come
on.
You've seen it before.
Yeah.
He's not the first.
I heard something where the Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame, they don't even have a winner this year because there's so many problems with doping. It's hard to know who's done it and who hasn't.
Really? There's
so much scandal around it. So.
One thing, though, when I was reading up on Lance Armstrong is kind of that story about, beating cancer and how it's tied up with maybe his own view of what it means to be a winner. I watched his Oprah interview or parts of it, and I don't know if he's really gotten the lesson yet, though, because when he was talking about testosterone, he was like, oh, I only took a little bit of this, enhancement, and then with testosterone, I almost, explained it to myself as I needed it, to be on an even playing level.
I think, when we talked about does winning define your morals, and there's a certain point where, you can make it okay in your head. Like, this is okay. It's just a little bit of this or a little bit of, this is a natural, I'm sure there's something in his mind that made it okay so that he could live with himself, but I think all of that's kind of crumbling. So on one hand, this could be like the worst, the low point of his whole life, but it could be a chance to really rebuild it too.
It's true.
With that human character that we were talking about earlier, and that, winning, it really isn't everything, and there are certain things that are way more important. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most emotional moments on the Oprah interview was when he was talking about his children, having to tell his children, like, no, really, don't defend me anymore. This is true. And I could understand that. I hope, I really hope in my heart that he's taking that as a priority now.
I hope so too. And I also hope, I feel that this is true, but I hope that we're ready to look at what it means to win out of that lens of every person for themselves and into this new lens of cooperation. I see it, like, again, outside of sports in a lot of places. And I think it's just the way we're shifting.
Yeah, as a kind of humanity that we'd like to see. Not everyone can be the first at everything, but everyone can really go to their own individual best and their own individual completion instead of it being only one person can have the most money, only one person can have the most fame, but everyone has their own self that they can complete or really work towards in their own lifetime, no matter where you are on the scale, on the food chain. So I know we're talking a lot about winning, so why don't we go to our own energy win, energy fail. For the win, we have the U.S. Department of Education. The civil rights arm of the Department of Ed just announced that access to school sports is a right, and that students with disabilities must be allowed to compete for a place on the team or have a league of their own. We know government policies can divide people sometimes, but we don't see how anyone could have a problem with this. So Department of Ed, you're the sheriff! This week's major buzzkill is a Houston family who displayed their staggering insensitivity at a local restaurant. The family was sat close to another party which included a 5-year-old child with Down syndrome. When the child started making noises, as 5-year-olds tend to do, they asked to be moved, which they were. But even after that, the waiter overheard them saying, "Special needs kids need to be special somewhere else." Upon hearing this, the waiter, Michael Garcia, decided he could not serve them and asked them to leave. Houston family, you are failing at life. But on another note, I think we can give an extra win to the waiter, Michael Garcia. Thanks for watching The Shift. Let us know where you weigh in on the Lance Armstrong controversy, and what's your definition of winning? Like us on Facebook and Twitter at The Shift Show. And that's it. Until the next time, see you later.